Hello children, so let's continue with our revision. Hope you all are fine over there. So in the previous sessions we have almost covered 7 chapters and today we are starting our 8th chapter, that is gravitation. And in gravitation chapter you know that the basic concept is the universal law of gravitation put forward by Newton. So study the statement for the universal law of gravitation. And acceleration due to gravity is also another important concept in that chapter. Acceleration due to gravity is the acceleration experienced by a freely falling object, and this acceleration due to gravity has a constant value, that is 9.8 meter per second square. Even though we used to say that small g is a constant and it is 9.8 meter per second square, there is a small variation in the value of g as we move from poles to equator. So the value of g is greater at poles and lesser at equator. Okay, so the acceleration due to gravity, g is not same everywhere. There is a small variation in g as we move from polar region to equatorial region. And at the same time, this acceleration due to gravity does not depend upon mass of the objects involved in free fall. If we consider the free fall of rubber, scale, eraser, ball, stone, or let it be anything, acceleration due to gravity will be same for all the objects. That means all the objects will reach the ground simultaneously. Okay, so acceleration due to gravity does not depend upon mass of the object. It is a very important concept and you must remember that. You can expect a question based on this concept. Okay, so acceleration due to gravity, small g, does not depend upon mass. Now, I told you acceleration due to gravity has a small variation, but at the same time, this value g is equal to 9.8 meter per second square is valid for the objects on the surface of the earth. If we consider a point which is above the earth, or if we consider a point which is below the earth, the acceleration due to gravity g is different. And there the acceleration due to gravity can be found out using this expression. The acceleration due to gravity varies with the altitude and with the depth. So consider a point here which is at situated at a height of h from the surface of the earth. So what will be the acceleration due to gravity at this point? So acceleration due to gravity at this point can be determined using the expression gh is equal to g into 1 minus 2h by r. Okay, where h is this height from the surface of the earth and capital R is the radius of the earth. Okay, so on the surface of the earth, that means here the value of g is 9.8 meter per second square. As we move above from the surface of the earth, the value of the g decreases. Okay, because gh is g into 1 minus 2h by r. From this it is very clear that gh is less than g. So the acceleration due to gravity decreases as we move above from the surface of the earth. Similarly, variation of g with depth. So for that, consider a point here at a depth d from the surface of the earth. So now we are at a distance d below the surface of the earth. So there the acceleration due to gravity can be calculated using this expression gd is equal to g into 1 minus d by r, where d is the depth and capital R is the radius of the earth. So from this equation also it is very clear that gd is less than g. That means the acceleration due to gravity at a depth or below the surface of the earth is less than acceleration due to gravity on the surface of the earth. So from this it is very clear acceleration due to gravity is maximum on the surface of the earth. Acceleration due to gravity is maximum on the surface of the earth. And one more thing I want to remind you, at the center of the earth, weight of an object is 0, because I told you acceleration due to gravity is maximum here on the surface of the earth. As we move towards the center, the acceleration due to gravity decreases, and finally at the center acceleration due to gravity g becomes 0. Okay, so weight of the object is also 0. Okay, this is a very important concept. So weight of the object is 0 at the center of the earth. Now, Another important concept is escape velocity and orbital velocity. So many other concepts are there, but I am focusing on important concepts only, but you must go through all the derivations of this chapter. So escape velocity. What is escape velocity? Escape velocity is the velocity which is required for an object to escape from the gravitational pull of the earth. And on the surface of the earth, escape velocity is 11.2 km per second. That means that much speed must be given to an object in order to project it away from the surface of the earth. And expression for escape velocity is V is equal to square root of 2 rg or V equal to square root of 2 gm by r. And orbital velocity. Next is orbital velocity. So orbital velocity is the velocity that is required to maintain the satellites on the surface of the satellites on the orbit. Okay, so what is orbital velocity? It is the velocity with which the satellites revolve around the earth. Okay, so what is orbital velocity? Orbital velocity is the velocity with which the satellites revolve around the earth. And orbital velocity expression is square root of gm by r plus h. And this is the relationship. There is a relationship between orbital velocity and escape velocity. That is orbital velocity. Escape velocity. Escape velocity, that is VE, is root 2 times orbital velocity. Okay, so this is the relationship between escape velocity and orbital velocity. Now, what is the total energy of orbiting satellite? Total energy of orbiting satellite expression is minus half gmm by r plus h, and this is the total energy. Total energy means it is the sum of potential energy and kinetic energy of an orbiting satellite. So that's all about the gravitation chapter. We have discussed the most important concepts, and you should study the derivation of all these concepts. It is very, very important. All these concepts. Okay. Next chapter is mechanical properties of solids. So in mechanical properties of solids, we discussed about stress and strain. And what is stress? Stress is the restoring force developed per unit area of the object. So what is stress? It is the restoring force developed per unit area. And what is strain? Strain is the effect of stress on an object. So whenever a force is applied on an object, some effect is observed on that object, and that effect of that stress is known as strain. For example, if some force is applied to increase the length of the object, the length of the object will increase, and the fractional change of that length is considered as strain. And three types of stress are there. Longitudinal stress, that means it is the stress related to the change in length. Tangential stress, it is the stress related to the change in shape, and it is developed when a tangential force is applied parallel to the surface of the object. Now next is the hydraulic stress, or which is known as the volume stress, and it is mainly related to the change in volume, and it is mainly experienced for the objects which is submerged in water, hence the term hydraulic. Okay, and corresponding to three types of stress, there are three types of strain: longitudinal strain, shearing strain, and volume strain. And the general equation for stress is, what is the general equation for stress? General equation for stress is force by area, and general equation for strain is change in dimension by original dimension. Change in dimension by original dimension. Okay, so if there is a change in length, then we will get longitudinal strain. So longitudinal strain expression will be delta L by L, which is change in length by original length. And shearing strain, it will be delta L or delta X by theta. Shearing strain is theta, and it is delta X by L. And volume strain is delta V by V. Change in volume by original volume. And next we discussed about Hooke's law, and Hooke's law states that stress for small deformation, stress is proportional to strain. Stress is proportional to strain, which means stress is equal to K into strain. This proportionality symbol is removed by adding a constant. This constant is K. So therefore K is equal to stress by strain. Okay, K is equal to stress by strain. So this K is called the elastic moduli. So the constant K is elastic moduli. There are three types of elastic moduli corresponding to three different types of stress and strain. There are three types of elastic moduli. One is Young's modulus, second one is shear modulus, third one is bulk modulus. So Young's modulus is given by Y is equal to FL by AL. Shear modulus is FL by A into delta X, and bulk modulus is minus P by delta V by V. Minus sign indicates that a change in volume corresponds to. So here we can discuss the application of elastic moduli or application of the elastic behavior of the solids. So you might have seen the girders and beams are possess I shape. So what could be the reason for that? See, if we consider a beam like this and we suspend a weight here at the middle of the beam, what happens? The beam will have a tendency to bend like this, isn't it? The beam will have a tendency to bend like this. This is called the depression produced due to the weight. Okay, and this depression expression is given here mgl cube by 4y bd cube, where m is the mass of that weight hanger, and g is the acceleration due to gravity, l is the length of the beam, and y is the Young's modulus, b is the breadth, and d is the depth of the beam. Okay, so this is the depression produced when a weight is suspended in the middle of the beam. Now, this depression is not favorable for us. We should decrease or reduce this depression. So what can we do in order to decrease or reduce this depression? So from this expression, it is very clear. Depression is directly proportional to L cube or length and inversely proportional to BD cube, because all other factors are constants. Mg by 4y is constant, so let's ignore that one. And depression delta is directly proportional to length and it is inversely proportional to breadth and depth. So here again, if we consider depth is, the power of depth is 3, but the power of breadth is 1. So if we bring any change in breadth, it is not going to affect the depression in any way. There is no significant change can be observed in the depression. But at the same time, if we bring a small change in depth d, a significant change can be observed in the depression. So instead of breadth, we are giving more attention to depth of the beam. Okay, so in order to decrease the depression, we should decrease the length and we should increase the depth. Okay, so what will be the shape of the beam? See, so the beam will look like this. Okay, beam will look like this. Length is decreased and depth is increased. Breadth remains the same. We are not going to bring about any change in the breadth. So the length is decreased and depth is increased. So the beam look like this. Again, in the case of such beams, there is a problem of sidewise bending. And that sidewise bending of the beam like this is known as sidewise bending of the beam is known as buckling. Okay, so buckling is also not favorable for us. So to avoid buckling, we will keep the surface area here. We will keep the surface area more, and in the middle area, we will keep the surface area less, and again in the bottom, the surface area is kept more, like this. Okay, so what is the shape of the beam now? It possesses an I shape. So the bottom and top surface area is kept more than the middle portion. Hence the beams possess an I shape. Okay, so the shape of the girders and beams are usually I shape. This reduces buckling and increases the strength of the beam. So many advantages are there, Advantages are it reduces the weight of the beam, it saves the material, because if we take a beam like this, we need to use materials for this whole portion. But at the same time, if we take a beam like this, the material used for the construction of this portion can be saved, isn't it? So it prevents buckling and it reduces the weight of the beam, it saves the material. So these are some of the advantages of the beam. So next we can discuss the mechanical properties of fluids. Mechanical properties of, in the chapter mechanical properties of fluids, we discussed about the pressure and its variation with depth. So pressure P is equal to H rho G. This equation clearly tells us the variation of pressure with depth. So the pressure varies with depth or height H. Okay. And next concept is hydrostatic paradox. So what do you mean by hydrostatic paradox? If we consider two different vessels like this, we if we consider two different vessels like this, we think that the pressure acting at the base of these two vessels will be different. But it's not like that. The pressure acting at the bottom of these two vessels will be same if same amount, or if the liquid is filled in these vessels to the same height. Okay, so this is hydrostatic paradox. Against our expectation, we are getting a result. So the pressure does not depend upon the area, base area of the container, but depends upon the height of the liquid column above it. Okay, and next is Pascal's law. So what is Pascal's law? Pascal's law states that the pressure exerted at any point on the liquid is equally distributed or transmitted to all other parts of the fluid. So Pascal's law is important. Pascal's law of transmission of fluid pressure, and two applications of Pascal's law are hydraulic lift and hydraulic brake. So it is clearly explained in the video lesson and it is also there in your notes. So please go through your notes and study the applications hydraulic lift and hydraulic brake, which are the applications of Pascal's law. And then we discussed about streamline flow and turbulent flow. What do you mean by streamline flow? In streamline flow, it's an ordered flow. We can see the streamlines are parallel to each other. It is an ordered flow. The velocity of the particle crossing each point in the streamline flow will be the same. But at the same time, turbulent flow is not an ordered flow. It is a disordered flow. Okay, a random flow, we can say. No order is maintained in the turbulent flow. So if we consider a cigarette smoke, or if we consider an agarbatti smoke, for some portion we can see a streamlined flow, and after that we can see a turbulent flow. So Reynolds number helps to determine the streamline and turbulent flow. See, if Reynolds number is less than 1000, then it will be a streamlined flow, and if Reynolds number is greater than 2000, if Reynolds number is less than 1000, it will be a streamlined flow, and if it is greater than 2000, it will be a turbulent flow. Thus, Reynolds number helps to determine the nature of flow. And next we discussed equation of continuity. Equation of continuity is AV is equal to a constant. So AV means area and V is velocity. So if AV is equal to a constant, then we can write EA is inversely proportional to velocity. That means wherever area is less, the velocity will be more. So if we consider two areas of the pipe like this, this pipe is having a non-uniform cross-sectional area. Here area is less, here area is more. So where the velocity will be more? Here where the area is less, the velocity will be more as per equation of continuity. But here velocity will be less because area is more. So the velocity of the water or fluid coming out from a small opening possesses high velocity, and the water coming out from a very large opening possesses very less velocity. So that is based on equation of continuity. And another important concept is Bernoulli's principle. Bernoulli's principle states that the total energy of an incompressible fluid remains the same. That means the sum of kinetic energy, potential energy and the pressure energy of an incompressible fluid flowing through a tube of non-uniform cross-sectional will be the same. So the statement and proof of Bernoulli's principle is very important. You can expect that question. statement and proof of Bernoulli's principle. Very, very important. So please study the derivation of Bernoulli's principle. And next is the Magnus effect, and but it is one of the application of Bernoulli's principle, Magnus effect. Magnus effect is the dynamic lift experienced by an object which is spinning. So you might have noticed a spinning ball. When a ball is spinning, what happens? The air above the ball will look like this, and the path of the air particles below the ball will look like this. So here it is very clear. The particles above the ball will have more velocity and the particles below the ball have less velocity. So where velocity is more, the pressure is less, and here velocity is less, so pressure will be more as per Bernoulli's principle. So fluid has a tendency, or air has a tendency to blow from or flow from the low pressure region to the high pressure region, isn't it? Fluid has a tendency to flow from high pressure region to low pressure region. So this is the high pressure region, this is low pressure region. So there is an upward movement from high pressure to low pressure region, and due to this upward movement a lift is experienced, and this dynamic lift experienced due to spinning is known as the Magnus effect. Okay, then next is angle of contact. So what do you mean by angle of contact? See, angle of contact is the angle between the solid and the liquid. See, if we consider a glass plate like this, and a spherical drop is in contact with this glass plate. So this is the curved surface, and draw a tangent to this curved surface. Okay, and you can see two angles here. So the two angles are the angles between the tangent and the solid surface. This is the glass plate, so this is the solid surface, and this is the liquid surface. So this is the angle between the tangent drawn to the liquid and the solid surface. This is also the angle between the tangent drawn to the liquid and the solid surface. An angle of contact is the angle between this tangent drawn to the liquid surface at the point of contact and the solid surface. So both are angles between the tangent and the solid surface. So which angle can be considered as the angle of contact? We will neglect this angle because this angle is not inside the liquid. At the same time, we should consider this as our angle of contact because this angle is lying inside the liquid. Okay, so this is angle of contact. So if the angle of the spherical drop takes a spherical, or if a drop is spherical in shape, when it is in contact with the solid surface, angle of contact will be obtuse like this. Okay, so this case we can see that the drop does not spread on the solid surface. That means the drop or the fluid does not wet the solid surface. So in such a case, angle of contact will be obtuse. But at the same time, when the water spreads or when the fluid spreads over the solid surface like this, what will be the angle of contact? See, here this is the point of contact. Here we will draw a tangent. Here we will draw a tangent, and this is the angle between the tangent and the solid surface. So this is angle of contact, and this is acute. So in the case of fluid which spreads on the solid surface or which wets the solid surface, angle of contact is acute. In the case of drops or the fluids which does not wet the solid surface, angle of contact will be obtuse. And for plain water or pure water, what will be the angle of contact? For pure water or for a plain water, angle of contact will be 0. It is very important. Okay, so that is angle of contact. Then we discussed about the Stokes law and terminal velocity. So what is Stokes law? Stokes law gives an expression about the viscous force experienced by a fluid when it is, or experienced by a spherical object when it is moving through a fluid. Okay, so what is Stokes law? Stokes law gives an expression about the viscous force experienced by a spherical object when it is moving through a fluid. Consider a raindrop which is falling down. So that raindrop is falling through the medium air, which is a fluid. So as it moves down, its velocity increases, but after reaching a particular point, all the forces acting on it will be balanced, and from thereafter it will move with a constant velocity, and this constant velocity is known as terminal velocity, and this is the expression for that terminal velocity. And so Stokes law expression is force F is equal to 6 pi a neta v, where a is the radius of the spherical object, neta is the coefficient of viscosity, v is the velocity of the spherical object. Okay, so this force is the viscous force experienced by the object when it is moving through a fluid medium. And next is capillarity. What is capillarity? The upward movement of the liquid through the narrow spaces is known as capillarity, and how much capillary rise has taken place can be observed or can be calculated using this expression S equal to T2S cos theta by A rho g, where S is the surface tension, theta is the angle of contact, and A is the radius, rho is the radius of the capillary tube, rho is the density of the liquid, and g is the acceleration due to gravity. See, you can expect a problem like this. One water drop of radius 1 millimeter is split into or is broken to 1000 water droplets. So what is the work done in this process? Okay, so here we can see one water drop has been broken to 1000 droplets. So the mass of the single water drop must be equal to mass of the 1000 water droplets. So mass remains constant. You know that mass is equal to density into volume. So what is the mass of a single water drop? It is density of that water drop and into its volume. So let's the volume expression be 4 by 3 pi capital R cube, where capital R is the radius of the water drop and rho is the density of the water drop, equal to 1000 into, this is not 100, this is 1000 into mass of a single small drop is 4 by 3 pi R cube rho. Mass of 1000 droplets will be 1000 into 4 by 3 pi small r cube into rho, where small r is the radius of this small droplets. Okay, now so here 4 by 3 pi will be cancelled, rho will be cancelled, and we are left with r cube equal to 10 cube r cube. Therefore r is equal to 10r. Then what is the increase in surface area? Increase in surface area will be 1000 into 4 pi r square. That means the surface area of 1000 water droplets minus surface area of the single droplet. So when you calculate, you will get the increase in surface area as 4 pi into 10 raised to minus 5 into 0.9. And what is work done? Work done is increase in surface area into surface tension. So increase in surface area is 4 pi into 10 raised to minus 5 into 0.9 into surface tension is given in the question, will be given in the question. So substitute the surface tension expression. You will get the value for the work done. Okay, so that's all about the important concepts of the chapter mechanical properties of fluids, and we will discuss rest of the chapters in the coming video sessions. So all of you do the revisions properly, practice thoroughly all the derivations discussed in this revision session. So all of you stay home, stay safe, keep learning. Thank you.